Early spring, 4111, year of the Tusk, the northern Junati steppe. On the barren grasslands of the Junati, a Sylvendi rides. He has taken what vengeance he could after the defeat at the Battle of Skiotha, where the Cnaiur, led by Ikirai Confis, humiliated his people. Now, Cnaiur Urs Skiotha seeks the barrows of his ancestors, though he cannot explain why. He was a man who took counsel with the dead, rather than the wise. When he spies a vulture, Cnaiur realizes that something has recently died. Cautiously, he urges his mount forward, only to find dozens of dead men, felled by Shronk arrows. He dismounts, studies the field before him. The men are Norsirai, strangers in his lands. Creeping forward, he starts finding the fallen bodies of Shronk. The carrion birds sense Cnaiur's approach and fly away, revealing even more of the fallen. Only the barrow's apex was bald, the last stand of a single man, an impossible stand. Cnaiur sees the lone survivor, sitting cross-legged on the summit. As the vultures flee, the man turns to him. With a profound horror, Cnaiur realizes that the visage is familiar to him. His heart thunders with fear and rage. He approaches the sitting man, places his sword upon his throat, and props the face up. The two men lock eyes. "You are Dunyain," the Sylvendi whispers, as Anaserembor Kellis collapses from blood loss and exhaustion. Returning to camp with his captive, Cnaiur's thoughts turn to a time when he was a mere stripling, before his father was killed, before his heart was cleaved in two. When he was 16, a raiding party brought back a slave, a blond man with blue eyes, taken from Shronk captivity. Strange in and of itself, since the Shronk do not commonly take living prisoners, but the Sylvendi didn't spare this much thought. The Norsirai slave was gifted to Chieftain Skiotha's wife, birth mother to young Cnaiur. The man was in a pitiful condition, skinny, filthy, and as meek as any slave must be. Yet, when Cnaiur returned wounded from a rite of passage gone disastrously wrong, it was he who spoke the only words that might soothe the young hunter's heart. "You've killed the wolf," the slave said, drawing him up from the dust. His glistening eyes seemed as fixed and immovable as the nail of heaven. In his anguish, Cnaiur found a shameful reprieve in the outlander's eyes. Sanctuary. But it didn't happen as it should. Moingus nodded. "You have killed the wolf." Those words, those captivating words. Nothing had happened as it should have, and yet the outcome was proper. He had killed the wolf. Over the days that follow, Moingus gradually revealed his true self to Cnaiur. Impertinent, irreverent, insightful. He refused to show proper respect, despite the beatings the young man administered, but insisted on looking him in the eye, on being heard. "Why? Why do you provoke me? Because you, Cnaiur Urs Skiotha, are more than your kinsman. Because you alone can understand what I've to say. You alone, more capturing words. What young man does not chafe in the shadows of his elders? What young man does not harbor secret resentments, pompous hopes? In time, young Cnaiur did hear and understand. He learned the basics of rational thinking, developed a taste for intellectual inquest, realized that there was no tradition of his people that couldn't be challenged. If life is like the steppe, asked Moingus, and the ways of crossing it are numberless, then why do the Sylvendi always do things the same way? Why stubbornly follow the tracks left by one's forebears? Where no paths exist, a man strays only if he misses his destination. There is no crime, no transgression, no sin save foolishness or incompetence. But you already know this. You stand apart from your tribe. Moingus' hand drifts out to clasp Cnaiur's. Is it a sin for me to touch you thus? What path have we strayed from? None. Why? Because we ride the trackless steppe. He drew Cnaiur's young hand to his lap. How could bliss ache so? Tell me, chieftain son, what do you desire before all things? Tell me, and I'll show you the trail you must follow, to become a great chieftain of the people. Those words, those heartbreaking words. Within months the old chieftain was dead, the new one was weeping, and Anaselembor Moingus was free to continue his journey south. Over time, the love and wonder Cnaiur once felt before Moingus would turn to hatred, black and bitter. He hated the man who manipulated him, and hated himself for being weak enough to succumb. Weeper. And now, 30 years later, another arrives from the north, another Dunyain, who would use logic and reason to conquer and enslave. What to do with such a man? The kernel of a plan begins to form in the tortured mind of Cnaiur's Skiotha. Dare he use the son to find the father? Cnaiur knows that his captive, Anaselembor is not to be trusted. He knows that to merely speak to a Dunyain is to bare one's heart and soul. To combat this, he sends one of his wives as a proxy, his first wife, Anissi, the one who understands him best, the one in whose arms he allows himself to weep at night. She returns puzzled and admits that she fears the Dunyain as much as she does her husband. Already he speaks our tongue as well as any slave of 10 years. His eyes do not seem to blink. He has already made me laugh, made me cry. The following day, Cnaiur meets with Anaselembor in person. He has the Dunyain chained in a yaksh. The man looked and reeked of frailty and sickness. Cnaiur wonders if the Dunyain is a witch, as his wives suspect. To test this, he tosses him a kore. Kellis catches it mid-flight. Nothing happens. You don't trust me. You fear me, says the captive. I fear nothing. No response. A pause to consider ill-chosen words. No, the Dunyain finally said. You fear many things. A dark fury wells in Cnaiur's breast, for he knows that this was the same way Anaselembor had toyed with his heart. He tells the Dunyain that he knows of his power, and that he will do the contrary of what he says. He demands to hear the truth of how Kellis came to be there, and threatens to put him to death if he suspects falsehood. Without a moment's hesitation, the Dunyain responds, claiming that his purpose aligns with Cnaiur's. Words for your kind are knives, shouts the chieftain. The Sylvendi orders the prisoner to be bound to a pole and tortured. The Dunyain sobs, howls, soils himself, but Cnaiur knows that it is all an act. Already the man is stealing the hearts of his people. Later that night, Cnaiur returns to Kellis, hoping for darkness to conceal his face. Again, he demands to know what the Dunyain's purpose is. For my kind, there's only mission. I've come for my father, Anaselembor Moingus. I've come to kill him. Now the dilemma is wholly yours, Sylvendi. Our missions would seem to be the same. I know where and how to find Anaselembor Moingus. I offer you the very cup you desire. Cnaiur decides to free Anaselembor and allows his wives to minister to his wounds. To find the father, he will use the son. The trackless steppe lay ahead. He traveled alone with a Dunyain, and he could imagine no greater peril. For 3 days Cnaiur utters not a single word. He knows that the moment he stops being wary of the Dunyain would be the moment he's lost. As the pair leave Utmote lands, Kellis makes his opening move, saying, "You cannot maintain this silence forever." He begins with small questions, which Cnaiur answers dismissively. The chieftain has his guard up, for he knows that every detail, every word, is an arrow in the outlander's quiver. But his resolve is strengthened by the fact that the Dunyain does need his help to cross the great plains held by Sylvendi tribes. Kellis asks how his father had made the journey decades earlier. Moingus was cunning. In secret, he'd scarred his arms in the way of the Sylvendi. After he'd killed my father, he shaved his face and dyed his hair black. Kellis asks who gave him the dye. Cnaiur's heart almost skips a beat. I did, he admits. I was possessed by a demon. Changing tack, the Sylvendi starts asking questions of his own. He wants to know why one would seek to kill his own father. And Kellis realizes that truth might suffice here. The Dunyain have hidden from the world for 2 millennia, and we would remain hidden, if we could, for all eternity. Yet, while I was still a babe, my father was exiled, contaminated by his knowledge of the outside world. He was a threat to our mission. 3 decades passed, and it was assumed he'd perished, but then he returned to us in an unprecedented way. He sent us dreams. We knew then that the purity of our isolation was polluted, and its source had to be found and eliminated. As they ride, Kellis studies the barbarian. He knows that this man is different from the world-born he has met thus far. After abandoning the trapper Luith, Kellis continued his study at Atrathau. Before he departed, 47 men followed him south. All of them perished to the Shrunk, sacrificing their lives to aid his mission. Kellis did not see faces. He saw 44 muscles across bone, and the thousands of expressive permutations that might leap from them. A second mouth, as raucous as the first, and far more truthful. He did not hear men speaking. He heard the howl of the animal within, the whimper of the beaten child, the chorus of preceding generations. He did not see men. He saw example and effect. The diluted issue of fathers, tribes, and civilizations. He did not see what came after. He saw what came before. Kellis knows that Cnaiur is special, and not only because of his uncommon intelligence. He wonders if Moingus might have purposely placed the Sylvendi in his path. As he begins to break down the barbarian's misgivings, he makes a fatal mistake by resorting to a metaphor similar to the one his father had used. He mentions the steppe being trackless. Suddenly, all he can see in the Sylvendi is rage and murder. He realizes that Cnaiur's awareness of the Dunyain modus operandi has rendered him difficult, perhaps impossible, to control. The two share amicus over their crackling fire, equally distrustful of each other. Kellis studies Cnaiur from across the fire. By the end of the steppe, I need him to cross Sylvendi lands, nothing more. If he hasn't succumbed by the time we reach the mountains, I will kill him.